Okay, well, I'll go ahead and get started. A couple of housekeeping things. Anne Marie will be monitoring the chat, so if you could put comments or questions there, that would be very helpful. We'd like to start by getting a sense of who's on the webinar today. So if you could identify your area of focus, that would help us. Okay. Give me another second in case anybody hadn't logged in. I think we got them all. Okay, we'd also like to know if you've been through some E-Rate 2.0 training, either through USAC or through the TRIG workshops, if you could give us a sense of that. Okay. And if you could give us a sense of your E-Rate knowledge, that would also be helpful. Okay. So since we have two advanced users on the call, we'll turn the webinar over to them and let them get started. Now, give you a sense of what we're doing. My name is Michael Andrews. I'm with E-Rate Central, and we provide most of the E-Rate support. Today, our agenda is to go over the modernization order, both 2.0 and 2.1, and we've tried to merge the ramifications of those two together. Given that most of the people on the call seem to be somewhat familiar, I will try to fly through that, but obviously there'll be places that that will be helpful for you to see. Then I'm going to do a little intro to the Form 471, and I'm going to show you some screenshots to make sure that you see what we have seen in regards to the way the 471 presents itself, issues that people are having, that type thing. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the E-Rate NSLP file and CEP and how that'll play out in the state of Michigan. Before I go on, just can I have a little clarification, maybe a chat response as to whether or not the volume's okay for most of you? Okay, then we'll go ahead. So an overview of the order, you know that the order focused on setting broadband as the primary goal. It tried to move funding, particularly to Wi-Fi connections. It tried to get rid of legacy services and remove the barriers that are preventing people, particularly from getting fiber connectivity to schools and libraries. It updated numerous portions of the E-Rate program, and last but not least, it added $1.5 billion to the E-Rate funding cap. So there are a variety of performance goals. I think you're all familiar with these. Two other things that they were attempting to do was move to much more cost effectiveness in purchases, and that'll be done by some of the processes and data that they're collecting, as well as their intent to disclose the information that's filed, particularly on the item 21s. And last but not least, their hope is that the new 470 and new 471 will create a more efficient E-Rate process. If you look overall at the two orders, 2.0 and 2.1, obviously they trimmed the eligible services list. They addressed various discount rate issues that both FCC and USAC have been struggling with. It increased the funding. It's a brand new and redesigned online 470 and 471, and that may be very difficult for people that don't have assistance in this process. It addressed procurement and contract issues, and there are some things about that that'll highlight as we go through that I think could be gotchas. It obviously attempted to simplify, and there are various other procedural changes they made, really having to do with synchronizing things in USAC, the FCC, etc. So in the eligible services list, I think we're all familiar that they've changed from priority system to category 1 and 2. That 1 was to target the services to the school or library. Category 2 within and targeted funding has been established for each of those categories so that we're not back in the situation of if category 1 uses most of it, we won't have category 2. I think you're going to find they're adequately funded. So there was a phase out of legacy services and ineligible category 1 services for funding year 2015. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the first line, the paging, texting, email, voicemail, etc. Telephone service components that weren't considered primary to providing voice services were deemed ineligible, and prior multi-year contracts will not be grandfathered in for those that have now been defined as ineligible. I'm hoping by now that message has gotten around, but that could still be an area of surprise. In the voice phase out, all of the eligible services effectively phase out on a schedule of 20 percentage points being deducted from the eligible discount percentage each year beginning in funding year 2015. One of the concerns I'd like to draw to people's attention is that if you look at the bands between 34% and 35 and 49 and 50, I think that's where we're going to see the greatest amount of impact on applicants, because in moving to a district-wide discount, I think we're going to see people fall down in a band and then lose an additional 20% beyond that. What I mean by that is if you look at the effective voice discount matrix, the 90 percenters moved to 70, the 80s moved to 60. So if you dropped in a band from 80 down to 60, you effectively dropped from 80 to 40, or 50% of your discount. I think you've seen this before, that the net effect of all of that is that the bands for most people, or the discounts for most people for voice, by the time we hit funding year 2016, that'll be the last year that they probably get much of their funding. Wireless data plans and air cards are basically deemed ineligible. There's been much discussion back and forth with the cell phone vendors, particularly on cost allocation of data versus the portion that's voice. I think most people are struggling to get that information, and I'm not sure what the people on the call have experienced. I know there's a lot of chatter with the state E-rate coordinators about getting that breakout from the vendors. Under 2.1, in funding year 2015, the amortization on installation charges has been removed. In funding year 2016, again, a variety of steps have been taken to remove the obstacles from people getting particularly fiber to their schools or libraries. So there's a variety of things that will be either waived, or a variety of things that will be changed. Special construction charges for dark fiber become ineligible, basically making both telecommunications and dark fiber being handled similar. Cost-effective fiber purchases become eligible, and that will require quite a discussion as to the efforts people will have to go through to be able to justify that it's cost-effective. It'll probably require them doing simultaneous multiple bids. Installment payments for non-discounted installation charges. One of the hindrances that the FCC recognized is that many applicants can't handle their portion, their non-discounted portion payment in the first year, and so they're going to allow them to spread that out. And then there's a state matching mechanism up to 10% available, that if the state will provide a percentage of the non-discounted portion, then effectively the FCC will contribute a matching up to 10%, not to exceed a total of 100%. For Category 2 equipment and services, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I'll fly through it. At least through 2019, and the point here is that originally there was a 2-year provision that's now been extended for the full 5 years as of the 2.1 order for those things that would support the LAN and managed Wi-Fi. Notice that ineligible are all other servers other than caching servers, and that telephone systems, including VoIP, are no longer eligible. Category 2 budgets are set up on a concept of a 5-year basis, so that over a period of 5 years, for every student you have in a specific school, you get a $150 budget for them. That is a pre-discount budget. So if I have 10 students well, I can't use that example, 100 students in a building, then they would end up getting $15,000 pre-discount. Based on their discount, they would get the remainder of that. The point being that you can use that entire budget allocated for the 5 years in the first year, second year, whenever you're awarded, or you can use it over multiple years. There's a special provision to allow new schools to estimate the number of students that they're going to have. If they basically overestimate, they'll have to repay that. There's a special provision in there for libraries to allow them to allocate their budget based on $2.30 per square foot, and based on a variety of lobbying that happened in between the 2.0 and 2.1 order for urban libraries, which have been defined as having a constituents of about 250,000. They get $5 a square foot. We are still working through the clarifications on exactly how you determine that. Hopefully that will come out soon. Minimum pre-discount funding per school or library is $9,200. So no matter how few students you have, you'll get at least $9,200 for small schools and small libraries. This budget mechanism replaces the 2 and 5 rule. The budget is allocated per school or per library. It's not per building, and there's been some confusion on that. The budget is also summed up over all the applications, so it's possible that an individual school or a district along with a consortium might apply, or a library and a library consortium might apply and actually include the same entity on those applications. Ultimately, that has to be reconciled so that the entire budget for either the school or the library is not exceeded because of the multiple filings. And from last we heard, first one in wins. If all the allowable funding is not used in the first year, then obviously you can file in subsequent years for that school or library, but the warning is that there's no guarantee how those subsequent years will play out. Category 2 rules beyond funding year 2019 are unknown at this time. The general statement is that there is no budget for non-instructional buildings. And in fact, there is a quandary right now because there's no way to put NIFs on the 471 under category 2, and so there's a problem there. There is a provision that you can allocate an eligible school or libraries fund to a NIF if in fact the NIF is housing or transporting services to that particular school or library. One of the concerns that we have there, and it should be a caution, is that there are a variety of questions that have been flying around about what does or doesn't make a NIF an eligible location based on educational purpose. And I think there's a lot of gray there, and you should be pretty careful not to get yourself in a bind of claiming that it is when it's not. Category 2 funding in any year is not insured. I made that point before. One of the issues that'll be raised is how the funding for category 2 will be allocated. And it basically is going to start at the top band and work down. Unlike in the past where they would cut off funding at a specific band if they couldn't fund the entire band, under the new guidance, they'll continue to fund until they've spent the last penny, and the way they'll do it within a band is to use the actual NSLP percentage as the tiebreakers, if you will, within that band. We're anticipating that funding below the 80 to 85% level is very likely in funding year 2015. So we're highly encouraging applicants to file, particularly with the additional funds that are allocated in the CAP, and other information we have seems to indicate funding will be there. So if you look at the discount matrix, you have basically a category 1 and a category 2 matrix. Category 2 tops out at 85%. Each school or group of schools in a district uses the same district-wide matrix discount for all their funding requests. Libraries will continue to use the discount percentage of the district where they're located. Consortiums, though, will actually average each member's district-wide discount together. There's a variety of discussion going on about ESAs right now, and rather than comment on it, I will tell you that there appear to be conversations as to exactly what they're going to and not allow ESAs to do, and we don't know the answer to that question right now, but this was the guidance that was in the original order, that they would use the combination of all the students in their constituent districts to determine their discount. I think I'm going to skip through and just hit some of the high points here. They're basically eliminating the survey method for discounts. That is the extrapolation concept. Basically, if you were to put out surveys and they're valid, you can count them as an entry. So if I had 10 surveys come back with 10 eligible students, then I'd have an additional count of 10. I can add that to my other processes, but the whole concept of extrapolation is out, with the exception of CEP, and we'll get to that. each library or group of libraries and library system is going to use a single system-wide matrix discount for all funding requests. And they're going to use the discount percentage of the district where the main branch of the library system is located. And for some library systems, that's creating interesting complexities. All individual libraries will continue to use the discount percentage of the district they're located in. I'm going to talk to you about the concept of CEP and how it's going to work. When we get to the 471, I'll talk to you about how that actually is applied. But basically, the way that the CEP is going to be applied is they're going to take the number of enrolled students and multiply it times the CEP claiming percentage free. And that percentage of free is basically derived by multiplying their CEP direct cert times their 1.6, and that gives them their percent free. Basically, if their direct cert percentage is 62.5 or above, then they're 100% free. If during the period of the 4 years while they're in CEP, if they change that claiming percentage free, then they must make the same change to the rate discount up or down. Talk a little bit about consortium discounts. They're going to be based on a simple average of member discounts. Consortium's the only type of applicant that'll have a non-matrix discount or a non-flat band percentage. The consortium discount applies to all FRNs within application. There are numerous questions on this, which I'll skip for the moment. USAC will prioritize applications for review for state and regional consortium apps that already went into effect in 2014. Appeared to be pretty successful. Consortium membership LOAs must be in place prior to filing the Form 470 and grant the appropriate authorization. At this point in time, it's getting a little late in the game to deal with this, but one of the things that we observed was that the authorizations in the LOAs did not match what they would be applying for Category 1 and 2, and so many consortiums have gone back and revamped their entire LOAs. If that is even the slightest bit of a problem, you should make sure that you look at your existing LOAs and see, in fact, if they give you the authorization to procure on behalf of the entities included in your 470. The urban-rural determination has gone back and forth. I think for the most part, we're pretty positive about where it ended up. It basically defines as rural those who are in urban clusters with populations under 25,000. A district or a library system with a majority of entities that are considered rural receives the benefit of the rural status. There was a variety of issues with the tool, and that'll play out in the 471. Cutting to the chase, let me say this. If in the 471, when you're filling it out, it will automatically insert the urban-rural status, or it will give you a question mark. If there is something that needs to be contested or clarified at that time, the applicant has the ability to override the status that the system put in. And during PIA, from what we understand from USAC, the PIA reviewer will in fact work through the discrepancy of what the system had versus what the applicant put in. Apparently those are all going to be flagged. If you've never gotten a picture of what an urban-rural cluster is, there's no way you can predict them. There are arbitrary lines that are drawn to identify that this particular town city, etc., is in close proximity to a major city, and I'll leave it at that. So going back, we got the maximum discounts for category 1 are 90%, and the maximum for category 2 is at 85. A couple of procurement and contract issues. In the process of entering into contracts, the FCC has put into rule that the item 21s will clearly indicate the services and pricing, and that information will be made public. I can tell you that we're hearing of numerous contracts that are being written after the decision has been made, inserting all sorts of language to try to make the contract and the pricing confidential. I think the FCC probably has a slight war on their hand, and we're not sure where all that'll play out. But the bottom line is they're committed to making those prices public. There's also going to be much more enforcement on lowest corresponding price, and I think you're going to see just quite a straightening out, if you will, of the vendor community to do things above board. Competitive bidding exemptions. There was a provision made that no 470 was required if you were using business class internet access services, minimum of 100 megabit down, 10 megabit up, if the pre-discount costs are $3,600 or less annually. We have a lot of concern about this specific item because the way that we had originally understood it is that this is a specifically tariffed item, and we think that the E-rate community out there at large is somewhat confused, thinking that if it meets these conditions, it happens to be the right thing. I'm not sure how we're going to get more clarification on that, and for many applicants, this will be irrelevant. Typically, we were hearing that this service is normally provided in large urban areas, but you may know better. The FCC has a provision to designate nationwide preferred master contracts to provide excellent pricing for Category 2 services. For funding year 2015, there are no PMCs designated, and there will not be. One of the cautions that we have is we're afraid that applicants will interpret that state master contracts are deemed eligible as preferred master contracts and fail to file their 470s, which would be disastrous. So they need to make sure that they realize that this isn't even in effect this year and that they handle their 470s as they normally would. Contract issues, there's expedited review for multi-year contracts. In funding year 2015, all the contracts will be reviewed, but in funding year 2016, there'll be an amended application for these particular multi-year contracts. One of the pieces of guidance that was in the 2.0 order was that you did not have to have a signed contract in place prior to filing a Form 471, but it had to be a legally binding agreement, and then they identified what might and might not be. What we have found is that most states would not uphold the guidance that the FCC was given, and so we strongly urge applicants to use this only as a deferral of getting the signatures, not to go in the absence of those signatures. And if you got questions about that, we can talk about it later. Then other simplification measures, the tech plan was no longer required. From here on out, 470s and 471s have to be filed electronically. And beginning in 2017, all forms and correspondence with the SLD will be done electronically. Bear reimbursement process. As of funding year 2016, that'll be done all electronically, and obviously USAC will be in the process of collecting the information to do that this year. One thing that you should be aware of, which for most people has already played out, there's been a change made to the way invoice filing deadlines are done. Basically, the cliff notes are that you need to apply for an extension prior to the original extension or original deadline date occurring. And from here on out, only one extension will be permitted. Anything beyond that will have to go to the FCC to be granted, and they basically said they'll only grant extraordinary circumstances. The bottom line here is the FCC does not like the fact that we have all this money tied up year after year because people are extending their invoices. From here on out, all appeals for USAC decisions first go to USAC, and then and only then will they go to the FCC. The only exception of that is that waivers of the rules have to go to the FCC because USAC can't waive a rule. I think most of you are aware that document retention is moved to 10 years. So let's talk a little bit about the forms, and I guess we're ahead of schedule, maybe. Close. There are minimal changes on the Form 470 for funding year 2015. The one thing that I'd like to draw your attention to is that many people are wrestling with where in the world they find their 470s online because they filed them prior to November 20th. If you've been through this before, you know that if you file a Form 470 prior to the New Year's form being released, you indicate on line 13 that it was for funding year 2015. However, all of those Form 470s are stored under funding year 2014. I think I see this question about every 2 days right now. On the revised Form 471, it is an entire redesign. If you haven't seen it, I'm going to show you some pieces of it before we get done here. It's far more applicant friendly. The only caveat I'd have on that is it's applicant friendly if you understand what to do in certain places because the instructions may not be clear. But overall, it's been pretty well received, but there are numerous issues and questions coming up. There are templates available to upload Block 4 and Block 5, Item 21. Block 4 changes. There's a single Block 4 for non-consortium applications, which is pretty straightforward. Additional information is required, and I think for some schools and libraries this may be an issue, minor, but maybe an issue. There have been revised discount rate calculations, and there are a variety of new survey questions, and the survey questions are causing a little bit of confusion at the present. On the 471, particularly Item 21, we have major changes. There's all sorts of new information being asked about the contracts. The voice phase-out discount gets adjusted in there. Entity listings are on a FRN by FRN basis, and I think most people were just overwhelmed by not only the amount of information, but particularly if you were filing for a large app, how in the world you were going to enter all this. I know of the state E-rate coordinators, most of the issues of being able to do it have been overcome, but there are some issues remaining. They're a little bit complex, and I'm not sure what USAC's going to do about them. Category 2 budget calculations and allocations are in there. Again, the line item 21 is far more extensive than in the past. The Ohio State E-rate coordinators, Larry, detailed 471 training, but we haven't decided when that's going to be. The reminder that the Form 471 application window closes on March 26th at 11:59. A couple of things that I'd like to point out, and then some comments, particularly from the newsletter that Wynn sent out. Again, a reminder that the level of data required is far more extensive. The item 21, because it's embedded in the 471, applicants have to have all that data ready and prepared to enter it, or they're not going to get any further. One of our concerns is that people do not wait to start their applications. Now, there's mixed guidance out there right now. Many people encouraged applicants to wait at least a week or so for a couple of reasons. One, until the system kind of settled down and there was enough documentation out there on the tips and issues that are going on, and also because there are some issues, particularly I think with libraries and the way that the discount calculation is set up. But we would encourage you to start earlier rather than later. Do the portions of the application that you can, and if need be, go into the training system and play around with it to get familiar with it. The last thing you want to do is try to figure all this out in the last 30 days of the window. Could be quite frustrating. Talk to you a moment about the Michigan E-rate NSLP report. We received word last week that the data that is put onto that report, they are not at this point believing that data is going to be available before mid-February. We've explained to them that could be problematic for many applicants, and we're seeing what we can do. Once that data is sent to me, then I will incorporate the CEP data, and I want to show you how this is going to play out on the form and how it's going to play out on the 471. One of the things that you're going to need is enrollment data. And so in the block 4, when you enter your student enrollment, we believe that you're going to enter the fall enrollment, which either is on the NSLP E-rate report or your most recently available, excuse me, we're dealing with CEP. So for CEP, it'd be what's on the report. What is not clear is there was never a definition in the order as to which year's enrollment a CEP district should use, and that was probably one of many things that weren't clarified. But most states believe there's really no choice but to use the fall enrollment that we would be producing on that report. Then when a school district or a school enters into a CEP agreement with the state of Michigan and ultimately USDA, they have a specific CEP % direct certified. And that percentage then is multiplied times 1.6 to get their effectively free reimbursement rate. the way that this is going to be handled on the 471 is that schools will enter their enrollment number, and then they'll enter their CEP, percentage direct certified, which is established on some previous April 1 year. And districts know this, but I will be providing this on the report to the best of our knowledge. When you enter those two pieces of information and you've defined them as a CEP school, the form 471 form itself will then do the multiplication of these three and give you your resulting, what you would have known as free and reduced numbers. Remember that that number cannot exceed your total enrollment. So once you exceed 62.4, I think it's 62.5 and above is 100% or more, you'll basically receive the total number of students that you have for enrollment. Hopefully that's clearer than mud. Highly encourage you to go to the E-rate modernization order area on the USAC website. They put all sorts of current information up there, the first and second order up there, the tips are up there, as well as the tips I think are being incorporated in the 471 site. And then I would also highly encourage you to be reading the news briefs from USAC, as well as E-Rate Central's newsletter. A reminder of these specific links, and after the webinar, I'll get with Josh and he'll post this presentation up there, less the 471 screens, because I'm not allowed to put those up. So I think with that, we're about 5 minutes early to get to our Q&A. So I'll open it up for questions.
Michael, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we have some questions. We have 2 questions from Lori and 1 from Jeff. So regarding Category 2 budgets, Lori asked, is there any guidance on how to enter funding requests when total contract exceeds budget allowance?
The guidance is painfully ambiguous, but specific. The specific guidance is do your best not to enter a request that exceeds your budget. What is normally being recommended is to try to incorporate components from the contract that would result in an amount as close to your budget as possible. USAC has been very vocal in stating that if they have to go through your contract and justify which pieces should or shouldn't should be used to determine that total number, as opposed to the applicant doing it in their application, they will defer those apps to later. So let me give you an example or two. If your total budget for 5 years was $30,000, and on your contract you had numerous APs, some switches, a router, et cetera, so forth, and the router itself was $30,000, USAC would highly encourage you to use that router as the basis for your application and not give them the total contract as items that you're requesting discount against. The problem that we have cited from the outset is we think that may be problematic with invoicing if it's not handled consistently all the way through. So the first encouragement or guidance that's been given is work with your vendors to have them identify in the contract those components together. And I'm not saying bundle them, but group them in some way so that, or itemize them in some way so that you can use them for your category 2 budget, and then work diligently to make sure that when they invoice consistently with the way that you have applied for your budget. Otherwise, you can pretty well rest assured your application is going to be delayed. If not in PIA, it'll be delayed in invoicing. Does that answer the question? Cool.
All right, thanks, Michael. The next question is from Jeff regarding Form 471s. He said, are they eventually deleted? Michael said that we could leave them for some time. I'm wondering how long or if that is never ending.
Okay, let me say it this way. A 471, to our knowledge, will stay in the system until either the window closes or it has been certified. And the only distinction I'm making about the window closing is typically applications that aren't certified by the window aren't viewed as active going forward, although in the past, and we don't know if this will continue to apply, USAC, we have requested in the past that USAC do some analysis on those applications to determine if the applicant thought they were certified and that some glitch occurred in the system. But technically, the application will stay there and you could work on it once a week if you want to. Does that answer the question, or did I miss the point? Okay, sounds good.
Okay, the last question that we have that was submitted to the chat pod is from Lori regarding the NSLP and CEP data. And she says, can you give us guidance on how school districts can get their hands on the data that will eventually appear on the Michigan E-Rate NSLP report?
Okay, so I'm going to over answer this question, if anything, so that we know what's available to us. First of all, every district, when they did the fall general collection, provided the numbers that I will ultimately receive, plus or minus audit changes. So as an example, a school district in October could have filed that they have 1,000 students, of which 300 of them were free and reduced. So technically, every school district, because they had to file this information, knows it, or it would never make it to me to begin with. One difference beyond just the audit is that CEPI will do a variety of reconciling students that come in and out between, I think it's a 60-day window, which is the fundamental problem with the fall collection, is that it is under 2 or 3 reviews and audit processes till I think, I don't know the current date, but it's late November, early December. However, E-Rate itself allows the school district to use its most recently available data since October 1st. And so many schools use their school lunch forms, their filings that they do for reimbursement, certified by a school or district officer as the basis for their discounts. The real issue comes with CEP. And for CEP schools, Anne Marie and I, right, Anne Marie? Anne Marie and I are working on getting approval to pre-release that list, but realize that because it is a district-wide discount for large school districts and consortiums, it's still going to be a bit complex without the ultimate report that we do. Can it be derived? Certainly. And if you're just dealing with a district, there's no reason why they can't do that. So let me tell you one other piece of information that I think would be helpful. The CEP percent direct cert and the CEP percentage reimbursed free are numbers that that school district has entered into a written agreement with the state of Michigan. So there's no reason that they would not be able to provide that to you. So at a minimum, they should know the enrollment numbers from what they filed in the fall collection. They should know their CEP information from their agreement with the state, which could be as old as 4 years ago. That percentage times the enrollment times 1.6 is their number. But for 471 filing, all you're going to need is the enrollment number and the percentage. Now, I've been in discussions with a variety of people from E-Rate Central, and we're believing that you could put either placeholder numbers or your best actuals now, go through the entire process, then come back to that one portion of the app and modify it when the NSLP report is released, and you should have no harm, no foul. It should recalculate. The way the 470 is designed is there are certain sections, you can go back to those sections and work on them. You just can't back up past the decision of what type of app it was. Does that give you everything you need, or you want a follow-up question? So Lori, in my conversations with CEPI, so let me go back to what I was telling you. When the data goes through all of the reviews and audits, that data is then finalized typically by mid to late December. I've had years that it still wasn't finalized till late January, and I think we're in one of those. Just because the numbers were put in by the district does not mean that the system has been audited and released. And I think that's the difficulty that you're in. I think it's the difficulty we're all in. And I think your information there is what is adding to the complexity, because they've got another system they've got to deal with this year. So let me tell you what's confusing about your comment about telling applicants to get that. I thoroughly understand if you're dealing with a library and they're trying to get it from a district. But in most districts, they put the numbers in that they're getting out. If you're looking for just the original numbers. If you're looking for audited numbers, I don't believe they're available yet. Any other questions?
I'd also like to send out a follow-up survey to all of you participants today. So if you would like to be receiving that, please type in your email address in the chat tool, and we'll go ahead and get your thoughts